Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Catholic Monarchist podcast. If you've listened to some of my previous videos, you probably have a pretty good idea of what my stance on Donald Trump and the Republican Party are. But just speaking generally about what the trends and the landscape look like, I'm not sure how any of us can honestly say that the Trump campaign of the 2024 presidential election has not been a total and unmitigated disaster. At this specific moment, I'm not even talking about his stances and policies, although I will get to those. I will get to those soon. But for now, rather, how can he be behind Kamala Harris in basically every national poll and almost every swing state poll? I know polls are weird and they're manipulated, but he was beating Biden before this. It was heading for a landslide. They starting to think maybe Virginia is up for grabs, Minnesota, even New Jersey. There were some close polls, but now the energy is just different. The presidential race that we're witnessing now is completely different for the most part than what was, even just a few weeks ago. And I get that the hype around Harris has been manufactured almost entirely, but if you're running a strong and popular campaign, then it shouldn't be making the kind of impact that it's doing right now. I mean, think about it. How many historical incidents have occurred that were in favor of Trump's campaign? He got the mugshot, which is a very cool cultural thing that gave him street cred. Then there were the indictments to show that the people in charge were all against him and he's still the outsider fighting for the common citizen. There was the debate meltdown from Biden, which showed just how close to the grave he is at this point, unfortunately. And instead of scoring big in that debate, Trump played not to lose. And it was just that. Biden performed horribly, and Trump did just enough not to screw it up himself. But there was nothing great from his performance. Nothing stood out. Then finally, the biggest of all, the assassination attempt on him, which, should have sealed the race right at that point completely. And then completing his martyr's journey and cementing his legend status. But yet, after all of this, he's still now an underdog in the betting markets against Kamala Harris, who is not popular. No matter how much manufactured hype the media tries to make for her, she just has never been that person. And so, why is this the case? Why is Trump still running behind Harris despite all of these events happening in his favor, giving him constant bumps? It should be pretty obvious. Had it not been for the indictment back during the primaries, DeSantis likely would have beaten him because his campaign was gaining steam. He was very competitive in the polls. Conservative influencers were flocking to him, and he was a fresh, new face in the national scene. And Trump was offering nothing new, nothing exciting. He was getting old, and many people were saying it was time for him to step aside and let the new generation come in. This indictment corralled most people back to him, and he was able to ride that to an easy victory, even though his policies, hadn't changed at all. And now, fast forward to now, where he's running against a Democrat who's at least alive and aware of her surroundings, and he's falling back to that same stale predicament that he was experiencing back in the early days of the primaries. Gone is the momentum from the indictments now that he's been vindicated, and it's so far in the past, people just don't care anymore for the most part. That debate moment with Biden is useless because he's not running against Biden anymore. And then the assassination attempt, that seems to have died out, mostly because they have not done a good job in utilizing it to their advantage. So how can Trump get back on top? Well, first, by identifying a direction. They have no strong idea about anything except, protecting the Israel lobbies. They just recently reestablished that, of course. They had to do that. But aside from that, they're basically just the Democrats, but a little less liberal in each category. They're fully pro-choice now, making it obvious that they do not mind abortion and will adjust their stance on it based on what they think will earn the most votes, thus having no real position on it. And so then there's the fully pro-homo deal they have now, which is very different than what it used to be the case just even a decade ago. And yet another issue that they have no conviction on. They changed right away. And now they're fine with trannies, supposedly, as long as the children aren't involved, which is another weak, directionless stance. They're pro-unlimited immigration, just so long as it happens legally. They act like liberals and kiss up to all the minority groups, while brushing away, white people, as if we're not important and don't exist anymore. In the case of that point, if only blacks or only Hispanics or only Jews or only Asians voted in the last two elections, Trump would have won a combined 0 electoral votes. So Trump and the GOP are practically saying, screw you, to the racial demographic that single-handedly carried him this far. And then there are a lot of other topics and issues with Trump and the GOP that are a complete mess, which, maybe I'll elaborate in a future episode, but for now, there's not enough time to cover everything. So, and then next point, for the record, the GOP takes these liberal stances because they are playing mental gymnastics and trying to constantly adjust themselves to fit a shifting culture. What some don't realize is that the culture is shifting because they're letting it happen. As the Democrats keep moving further left, the GOP keeps falling behind, and naturally, the general public also shifts with them. So think of, this is a political spectrum here. And let's say decades ago, this is where they were, right around the middle here. The Democrats decide we're going to shift, by the way, left. And since they control the institutions and the education and the entertainment, they do get a lot of people to start feeling that way. And then the Republicans say, oh no, if we don't move here, we're not going to get voted in anymore. And so it's just this constant thing. They move left a little bit again. Republicans have no backbone and no interest in keeping the culture where it was. They move this way again so that they can keep their 50% of the vote share, and then just boom, 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 and we're all the way over here, both of them. Just to kind of give you a visual. So, here's a novel idea. How about, instead of shifting policies and beliefs every minute of every day, establish a solid set of principles that are determined by your core base audience, which is white Christians, or just Christians in general. That's just the honest reality of the matter. Reestablish your dominance in that massive demographic. for now, until it keeps dwindling. Trump sent out a Truth Social the other day, finally acknowledging Catholics and how we've been persecuted here. Yet, of course, he had to cap it off by saying that Jews are even more persecuted. And we just can never have a moment. He always has to shoehorn in something else. So for some reason, I don't know. So, and another point, if you're going to preach that abortion is wrong, then practice that. Don't pretend you're being more humane than the left simply because you say that you're okay with murdering babies that have only been, 15 weeks alive instead of 20. If anything, that's worse because they know that it's wrong. For sure, they know that it's wrong, but are still willing to let some babies die, all for political strategy. Until they take a firm position on morals and principles, they'll remain this ever-changing chameleon with no real face that can ever be recognized. And this means conservative and Catholic or Christian influencers need to start holding their politicians more accountable. Draw a line and tell them to stick to it, or their support for them is finished. From a purely human standpoint, strategically giving ground in some issues seems like a sound idea, if it means you win and can govern and some conservative principles instead of none. But first, it just doesn't work like that anyway. It sounds decent in theory, but it still doesn't work. Because now because of this, both sides have moved so far yet left. It's still practically a 50-50 between Democrats and Republicans, when it comes to elections, winning elections. So it was 50-50 over here. We go all the way over here and it's still 50-50. So who's been winning when you look at it that way? If the conservatives really believe in God we trust, then how about they actually start doing that? Start sticking to policies and beliefs that are aligned with God and trust that He will take care of us. This other strategy just does not believe in God's power to help us when we're doing what we can for Him. The faithful Catholics at the Battle of Lepanto, at the Siege of Vienna, and many other instances placed their trust in God to help them, and He delivered. And these were almost impossible scenarios that worked out in the end. And we need to do that again. We need to stick with Christian principles and morals and pray to God to help us do the right thing. No more conceding and thinking it's all on us to make a difference. No matter what, we're not going to do everything on our own. And I know that's not easy. All of us in our lives have definitely been through times where we have not trusted God and when we should have. And it's no different here. It's not easy, but it's what needs to be done. And look, I hope that Trump can get through this all. He's who really got me back into politics back in 2015. And I pray that he can have some kind of revelation and turn this campaign around into something that brings a Christian message. And that's going to require a sizable overhaul in his staff and in his campaign in general. Yeah, I want to root for him, but he's not making it easy. So with that all in mind, that's all I've got for you today. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. God bless.